On Facebook and those ones who are on Zoom, we have a very important conversation that we are going to talk today about the Maputo Protocol. And with COVID-19, we really need to discuss about this and how we can ensure equality of women and girls. So I'm going to hand over this meeting to Mr. Sam Norga to continue, and then to Sarah.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this important conversation. I think it's very clear that with the impact of COVID and with the rise in the incidence of gender-based violence, we need to have a strategic and systematic way of addressing that. And it's a conversation that has been going on for a long time now. So we are happy you're joining us. And without much ado, I would want to hand over to Sarah to take us through the initial stages of the program. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Now, because we have everyone on board, we'll have the opening remarks by Victoria, who is the Acting Director for Women, Gender and Development Directorate from African Union Commission, followed by remarks by Mr. Rotmi, who is Plan International's Regional Director for West and Central Africa region. And then we'll also have remarks by Honorable Justice Lucia Sukabagor, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa from the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. That will be followed by presentation and overview of the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index Framework. The presentation will be made by Dr. Olumide Ajayi, who is the Executive Director and CEO of African Leadership Forum. Then we expect much of our time will be used through the discussions, Q&A, and also, the plenary discussion that we're going to have to discuss the scorecard and index framework itself. Thank you so much. So I would like to invite Victoria to give her opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Sarah, Sam, everybody. Commissioner Lucy Aswabo, the AU Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, Mr. Rotimi Josiah, the Regional Director for Plan International in West and Central Africa region, Dr. Olumide Ajayi, Executive Director of the Africa Leadership Forum, colleagues from the African Union Commission who are here, colleagues from the BRACs, dear sisters and brothers from civil society organizations. I see many of you here, and it's so exciting. Colleagues from the UN agencies, thank you so much. All of you, friends of the Maputo Protocol, friends of gender, all our friends, thank you so much for taking time of your very, very busy schedules to come and join us in this visual validation meeting of the first ever Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index. And this is really exciting for us, especially in the kind of environment that we are working in now, to have you here and thank you. It's great to see that you're all safe, you're healthy, and really we appreciate your presence here. Dear friends, dear colleagues, let me start off by saying that there really is nothing as exciting as an idea whose time has come. The scorecard and index is really one such idea that is relevant, especially in the context of this silent enemy called COVID-19 that is ravaging the continent and the world at large. And our main concern throughout this period has been gender equality, women's empowerment, women's rights, the rights of girls. We want to make sure that even in the context of a crisis like what we are facing right now, our instruments, especially an instrument as key as the Maputo Protocol, remains in the forefront of fighting the pandemic. How do we do that? Number one, it is to make sure that the instrument is implemented, the articles of the instrument come alive, especially right now, where we are seeing a rise in gender-based violence, where we know that women's health is compromised because in many instances we are focusing on the pandemic and other things, other women's rights concerns in relation to health are now having to be put aside. We know that the women's livelihood, the women who are sitting outside in the marketplace, their livelihood, their daily livelihood is compromised because of some of the responses that member states, and very relevant responses, by the way, that member states have put in place to fight the pandemic. What we want to make sure, and this is what the scorecard, the Maputo Protocol scorecard and index is doing, is to make sure that while we chase the pandemic, we do not leave women and girls behind. While we are chasing after the pandemic, we don't forget our gender equality and women's empowerment commitments. While we run after the pandemic, we make sure that the gains that we have made in terms of promoting women's rights, protecting women's rights, are not compromised. And this is even more significant because this year we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. That's number one. Number two, this is also the end of the African Women's Decade on grassroots approaches to gender equality and women's empowerment, which started in 2010 and is ending this year in 2020. And significant for all of us today in this meeting is that 2020 is the beginning of another women's decade that will focus on financial and economic inclusion for African women. Now, this pandemic, with all its impact on women, with all its impact on gender, with all its impact on girls, on young people, on our ability to enjoy our fundamental rights, for economic rights. Dr. Jai, if you could please mute your mic, I can hear you as I'm talking. Thank you. So as we make sure that we are pushing towards implementing or enjoying our rights, we also protect the gains that we have made. We want to make sure that this instrument is not only used for today as an emergency response measure, but we also want to make sure that we use it to protect the rights of women in the long run. And this is why we say that there is really nothing as exciting as an idea whose time has come. Because you package, the way that this instrument is packaged, the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index, is that it allows us to implement it today, to say to member states, can you tell us in your COVID-19 responses, how are you protecting the rights of women? How are we ensuring that women still get the access to contraceptives? How do we make sure that there is still access to education? How do we make sure that there is still access to justice during this time? But beyond this point, we say 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, again, what are we doing to make sure that we protect the rights of women and girls beyond the pandemic, but that this instrument is used as a recovery tool, as a recovery response tool, so that we don't come to 2023 and we say, oh, sorry, 2020 was a wasted year because of COVID. Not in our account, not when we are here as defenders of women's rights. This is not going to happen, and I'm very grateful to Plan International and the Africa Leadership Forum for really supporting the Gender Directorate, and of course for supporting the African Union Commission with this fantastic tool that will make sure that we not only protect the rights and protect the rights of women today, but we also make sure that beyond the pandemic, and of course there are going to be many other pandemics, that we do have a tool that we can use to protect women, to protect girls in the long run. And as I said, this is really an emergency tool that can be applied today. It's a recovery tool that can make sure that in the long term we don't lose the gains. But it is also an important tool to make sure that the member states implement the rights that they have committed to in Maputo Protocol. It's an accountability tool. We always say that, oh, it is difficult to monitor, women's rights, but now we have this tool that we can employ to do just that. And for us in the Gender Directorate, this is really exciting because we are also launching our online reporting platform that Dr. Jai and other colleagues as also in the continent, have been part of that. And we are very happy to say that this tool, this Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index, is going to be one of the documents that will be accessible through our new online reporting platform, and member states will be able to use this. And it is also taking us into the next revolution, the Africa, the digitalized Africa, and it's really exciting indeed. So I'm really getting carried away. So let me stop here and warmly welcome each and every one of you to this meeting. It's an exciting process, and I'm so grateful that we are starting it together with our friends, with our colleagues, our sisters and brothers in human rights and gender equality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Please, Madam Asubo is finding it difficult connecting to also Anna Foster. Please, can you help them? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria, for that very passionate, opening remarks. Without further ado, I'll now call upon my colleague, Rotmi, Plan International Regional Director for Western and Central Africa region, to also provide his remarks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Greetings to you all from Dakar. Great to be part of this important meeting. Thanks, Ms. Victoria Maloka, for your very powerful opening remarks, really showing the passion, the commitment of the African Union Commission. Ms. Victoria Maloka, Director, Women, Gender and Development Directorate, African Union Commission. Honorable Justice Lucy Aswagbo, Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Member states present here, representatives of UN agencies and development partners, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of Plan International, I would like to congratulate the African Union Commission, Women, Gender and Development Directorate on organizing this important event. We are very pleased to collaborate with the African Union Commission and the Africa Leadership Forum to support the development of this critical continental scorecard and index framework for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of women in Africa, Maputo Protocol. As an organization that strives for advancing children's rights and equality for girls, gender equality and women's rights are at the heart of everything we do. At the continental level, the African Union Commission, the regional economic communities, the government have made significant progress toward advancing the human rights of women, as they have produced instruments that are integrated into national laws to promote and protect the rights of women. The Maputo Protocol is one of the continent's great achievements on gender equality, and we recognize the efforts of member states in its integration into constitutions, into national laws and policies. This progressive legal instrument gives a diverse range of rights to African women and girls. It guarantees comprehensive rights that speak to women's equality and security, including the elimination of discrimination against women, the right to dignity, the right to life, integrity and security of the person, the right to have access to justice and equal protection before the law, the right to participation in political and all decision-making processes, the right to peace, the right to protection in armed conflict, the right to have access to improved autonomy in their reproductive health decisions, and to have an end to female genital mutilation in Africa. While we appreciate the progress around ratification, domestication, and reporting of the Maputo Protocol, we are also deeply concerned by the remaining challenges and the gaps of the full realization of girls' and women's rights in Africa. One of the major challenges of the Maputo Protocol is the reporting mechanism, which lacks effective framework and means to measure the performance of member states and hold them accountable in terms of commitment and expectation. While 41 member states have ratified the Maputo Protocol, only 9 member states have submitted reports on the implementation. 14 member states have not ratified the Maputo Protocol yet, mainly due to issues concerning women and girls' sexual reproductive health and rights, especially in relation to marriage or access to safe abortion, and some have put reservation while ratifying the protocol. We believe the development of the Maputo Protocol scorecard and index is a critical way to create a continent-wide scorecard and index framework for the purpose of analyzing and assessing member state performance in the implementation of the Maputo Protocol. We also believe that it creates a platform for transparency and accountability by the African Union Commission and the member states on the implementation of the Maputo Protocol. This framework will open the space for identification of best practices across the continent that can be adopted by less performing member states and provide an evidence-based feedback mechanism between the member states and the African Union Commission on Women and People's Rights. It will also provide advocacy opportunities for civil society organizations and other non-state actors in supporting member state efforts in holding them accountable on the commitment made, especially around girls and adolescent girls' rights. I'm particularly happy that this framework comes during this unprecedented challenge related to COVID-19, which risk to amplify existing inequalities. This important tool helps to support effective gender transformative COVID-19 response and recovery through the monitoring and implementation of the Maputo Protocol. Excellencies, distinguished participants, girls, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me conclude by confirming again Plan International commitment to collaborate on initiatives aimed at promoting and protecting the rights of girls and women in Africa. I wish you a successful deliberation and all the very best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dirotmi, for the wonderful remarks now. We are waiting for Justice Lucia Swagbor to join. She joined, but then I think the call has dropped. So while we wait for her, I would request Dr. Ajay to actually take us through the Maputo Protocol Index and Scorecard Framework. And then as soon as Justice Lucy joins, we will be able to have her here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, my colleagues from Plan International, the Africa Leadership Forum, the African Union, and I also want to thank all the UN agencies and all the other civil society members across the continent that are here this morning. I want to especially thank Plan for allowing ALF to collaborate with them in developing the framework for the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index. This morning or this afternoon, we are going to go through what we are packaged together within this index. First, I'm going to start with our COVID-19 story, and then we'll move on to talk about the context of the human rights, look at the methodology of the index and the scorecard, and then do like an appraisal of member states, which is our review, which I also explained that it was no more of our review, but a joint work that has been done earlier. Then we'll look at the performance assessment of selected state parties, and then we'll look at the conclusions, and then summary. Our COVID-19 story. The Africa Leadership Forum, apart from our work in the area of leadership, governance, gender, and women programs, also run an entrepreneurship program in which we'll empower people, generally working with the government. So in 2008, we started with this program, which was heavily subsidized by the government of Nigeria, in which people we are asked to train people. So because it was near free, and because we had to take it to the communities, we were able to train almost 10,000 women, which you see represented here as 51%. It was heavily subsidized. When the government stopped the subsidy, and then we were asked to charge economic price, and we were asked to also do the training institute. People will have to come to the center. The percentage of women dropped from 51% to 41%. During this time also, the government was piloting access to support their businesses. Now, as soon as COVID-19 started, we could not do this training in situ or physical again. We had to move online to start doing this training. What did we notice? We noticed that the percentage of women dropped from 41% to 24%. This time around, there are resources available for them. For example, each individual is supposed to provide maybe like $100 to access the training, generate their business plan, and that will enable them to have access to $5,000 to $22,000 from an intervention fund that government created about 2 years ago. You can see directly the impact of COVID-19 from our own experience on women. So where there are no frameworks in place to measure performance and progress, the suffering of women actually go unnoticed. This is the reason why Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index we're about to present becomes important in ensuring that gender equality and women's empowerment remains in the forefront of Africa's quest for sustainable development. The protocol, as we all know, is one of the continent's biggest statutory achievement on gender equality, women's rights, and women's empowerment, of course, that can be used to shape member states' gender and human rights compliance responses, particularly now that we have COVID-19. The protocol may be used as an important recovery tool to continue to guide the delivery of gender equality and women's rights commitment for women long after COVID-19, which is, of course, part of the reason why we are doing this. The index, by definition, it's a monitoring as well as an implementation tool that monitors compliance, identifies the gaps, and shapes implementation strategy to strengthen gender equality and women's empowerment and women's rights during emergency responses, and particularly to ensure that the gains that we have in area of gateway does not, we don't lose it, either as a result of pandemic or as a result of any other thing that happen within the space that women are supposed to occupy. Of course, we noticed since COVID-19 pandemic started around the world and in Africa, there has been an outcry about integration, equality, and inclusion of women's concerns in the continental, regional, and national responses. In particular, calls have been made for implementation of gender equality and women's empowerment is meant to protect women during this pandemic. A lot of things that happened to women during this pandemic will not happen if certain structure and framework has been put in place. This pandemic is challenging, but of course, we know that if we deploy the instrument that we have appropriately, we will be able to protect women. So what's the rationale behind the scorecard and the index itself? First, it's a proof that women's rights can still be realized during emergency and crisis. It is a form of audit and management, as well as a planning tool to examine the quality and effectiveness of gender practices and systems and allow member states to correct lapses as far as gender equality and women's empowerment are concerned. The scorecard and index is a creative framework to analyze the articles of the Maputo Protocol, show country assessment scores and outcomes, identify gaps, and provide recommendations on areas that need further action. It is also an innovative response that calls for collection, analysis, storage, and dissemination of gender disaggregated data to support gender analysis and gender responses during this COVID-19, even as that is generally as a broad framework for an ongoing data revolution in Africa. You've heard the director of the General Directorate said that we are going to digitalize Africa. This is part of the approach to exactly do that. Of course, in terms of goal, the aim of this project is to create a continent-wide scorecard and index framework for the purpose of analyzing and assessing member state performances in the implementation of Maputo Protocol and to ensure culture of inclusiveness in Africa's development and governance structure as a whole. What are the objectives? One is to develop and support implementation of a measurable and accurate scorecard and index framework for the Maputo Protocol as a performance measuring tool for member states. Two is to provide disaggregated data and information on the status of gender equality for effective generation of appropriate gender-responsive policies and other initiatives. Three is to create a platform for transparency and accountability for the implementation of Maputo Protocol. Four is to accelerate implementation of Maputo Protocol and reduce the negative impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women and girls across the continent. Well, the benefits, of course, a lot of this was also shared by the regional director of Plan International, is to serve as an emergency response measure, is to support member states to comply with their reporting obligations under the Maputo Protocol. Three is to underscore various commitments and responsibility by member states in implementing this protocol. Is to also serve as performance assessment tool for member states and create a space for extending the best practices replicated across the continent. May I say also that you find in chapter 2 of our work a number of good practices that we have identified along with the works of the UN Women and ECA and AU. It's also to provide opportunities for member state and non-state actors to build their capacities in furtherance of the effective implementation of the articles of the protocol. Number 6 is to offer advocacy opportunity for member states and non-state actors to ensure that implementation gaps that are identified are also closed as quickly as possible. Number 7 is to provide an evidence-based feedback mechanism between member states and the African Union Commission, as well as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Now, I will quietly and gently go through the methodology that we use in designing the scorecard and index in itself. We adopted what we call
apologies, Dr. Ajay. Apologies for interruption. Honorable Justice Lucia Swagbor has joined us. So because she has another meeting and she has to go, I would like to invite her to give us her remarks. Apologies.
Are you getting me? Are you getting me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry for, I don't know, I really don't know what happened, but the machine has not been cooperative. Thank you for your understanding. Ms. Victoria Maloka, Acting Director of Women, Gender and Development Directorate of the African Union Commission. Mr. Rotimi Josiah, Regional Director, Plan International West and Central African Region. Dr. Olumide Ajayi, Executive Director of the African Leadership Forum. Members of the African Union Commission, representatives of REX, civil society organizations, United Nations agencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. It is my pleasure to deliver these remarks at the validation meeting of the first ever Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index. I wish to congratulate Plan International and the African Leadership Forum for the immense support provided to the Women, Gender and Development Directorate to develop the scorecard and index. I also wish to thank all of you for joining this meeting to validate this important document, which will contribute in monitoring implementation of the Maputo Protocol and enhance accountability among member states. Ladies and gentlemen, the promotion of the rights of women and its protection in Africa has been a long, winding and often bumpy road. Between 1961 and 1979, African jurists, experts, and lawyers participated in a series of conferences and consultations to debate and develop a system for human rights protection in Africa. 2 recommendations from the Rule of Law Conference in Lagos in 1961 pointed to the development of an African Convention on Human Rights, a continental court that was accessible to everyone, and also the establishment of a commission. It took 20 years for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights to be adopted in 1981, and a further 5 years for the Charter to come into effect. The African Charter is further complemented by the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, popularly known as the Maputo Protocol, which was adopted in 2003 and entered into force in 2005. The Maputo Protocol unequivocally reinforces women's rights in totality, while expounding on specific and unique experiences of African women regarding inheritance, widowhood, and harmful practices, for example. In particular, the Maputo Protocol sets the standards for women's human rights in Africa. Despite the significant number of ratifications to the protocol, as of now, we have 42 ratifications, and the progress made in the implementation of the rights of women in Africa, the gains have been quite slow and low. Studies have shown that a number of factors, including, among others, lack of accountability absence of or limited access to verifiable data, and limited capacity for data and information processing have contributed to these less than satisfactory levels of implementation. This slow progress might also hold back the full implementation of Africa's development goals as encapsulated in the Agenda 2063. This therefore means that adopting a legal instrument is one thing, but ratifying and implementing its content requires the same tireless women and men of the continent who believe in its potential to pick up their advocacy tools and convince state parties to deliver on their commitments. It is not enough to put in place policies to promote gender equality. This must be backed by strong support frameworks to ensure that there is accountability for their implementation. And I believe that one of these accountability frameworks is the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index. I have no doubt that the scorecard and index will promote participatory and accountable institutions to reverse inequalities trends and push for action to accelerate greater change in the lives of African women and girls. The Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index will also provide state parties with an easy and quick instrument to assess their progress in achieving equitable growth and transformative development for women and girls in Africa. A tool of this nature has become even more important in the context of COVID-19 to ensure that women's rights are not neglected and that the gains already attained are not reversed during the pandemic. It is therefore a timely document that will surely reinforce current efforts to promote and protect women's rights, especially during the crisis. I therefore express my full support to the Maputo Protocol Scorecard and Index and enjoin us all to objectively look at this document and provide constructive feedback to strengthen it to make sure that it supports implementation of every article in the protocol. I look forward to receiving the final document that you would have validated. In the meantime, I wish you a successful and enjoyable meeting. Thank you and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Justice Lucius Wagbor, for that wonderful remarks, and also for your commitment to take the framework and the index and the scorecard forward. Dr. Ajay, you may continue from the methodology section. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We really thank Commissioner Lucius Wagbor for finding time to come and support the work that we're doing. She's always been there since the beginning, and we hope that by the time we finalize, she will also be there. Thank you very much for having time to come to speak to us. Thank you very much. Now, let me continue, because it was actually a good place to stop with the methodology, because this is where the work actually was done. Now, I was saying that we adopted what we call assessment question approach. This methodology uses relevant questions or indicators to evaluate the implementation of laws, legislative actions, policies, strategies, programs, and projects that state parties have developed and deployed in response to the demands of the articles of the Maputo Protocol.
Ajay, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I said that our assessment questions and indicators essentially focus on bringing out the expected responses from of member states to the demands of each of the article of the Maputo Protocol. For example, this is just broad. For example, because this is an example, does member states have appropriate legal instruments or laws or legislative actions that protect or promote the rights of women in a particular theme or focus of the article? 2, are there appropriate measures, policies, or programs to protect and promote rights of women on a subject matter? Does the article require functional structures to promote and enhance the rights of women? Does member states need to take certain actions that remove inhibitions to the exercise of human rights? Now, the number of questions and the expected responses to these questions, which vary from article to article, determines the scores attached to each article and as well as the thematic focus. The assessment questions that we use for the whole protocol itself yielded 226 indicators in total. The assessment questions are designed within the framework of the guideline provided by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. They follow both the thematic groupings as well as the article under each of the themes. All the 25 articles of the protocol, as well as sections or subsections in all 25 articles of the protocols between Article 2 to 26 were covered, because these are the articles that require direct actions by member states. The guideline recognized 8 thematic focus, but this project added a 9th theme based on Articles 25 and 26 of the Maputo, which speaks about reporting, monitoring, and implementation, as it were. Now, these are the categories of the article. This way the articles were categorized by the Commission. 1 is equality and non-discrimination, Articles 2, 8, 9, and 12. Number 2, protection of women from violence, Articles 3, 4, and 5. Rights relating to marriage, Articles 6 and 7. Health and reproductive rights, Article 14. Economic, social, and cultural rights, Articles 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Right to peace, Article 10. Number 7, protection of women in armed conflicts, Article 11. Last, Article 8, thematic 8 is rights of specially protected women groups, Articles 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. My last thing is remedies, implementation, and monitoring, which deals with Articles 25 and 26. This is very important because some people may be asking, you see, when you look at the guideline, member states were asked after writing their report, okay, you've seen the report you've written, you've seen the gaps, what are the actions that you like to take to remedy some of this, so that when you write your next report, we'll be able to look at it. Not all of them, like we'll find out later, after respond to it. So we needed to create that team to be able to say, you are not doing what you're supposed to do, you are doing what you're supposed to do. What are the stages involved in designing the scorecard and the index? First is that we develop relevant and functional and measurable indicators using assessment question approach. 2 is we develop tactical assessment score. Next is develop article performance index, then followed by development of thematic index for reporting countries as well as continent. Number 6 is development of Maputo Protocol Grand Index for reporting countries as well as for the continent. There were a number of assumptions that were used as background for the design of the scorecard. Like all of us know that you can't design an index without having certain basic assumptions. Number 1, in this instance, is that member states are ratified and acceded to the protocol. This is very important because if you don't do this, you cannot write a report. Number two is the member state had commenced implementation of Protoco. Is very important. If you don't implement, you cannot report and we cannot score you. 3 member states are working on all the articles. 4 is the member state had produced a report. 5 is that the report had followed guideline and identified themes in the guideline produced by the African Commission on Women and People's Rights. 6 is that assessment questions are meant to ensure that no part of the article of Maputo Protocol was omitted. We didn't omit anything. We covered everything. Number 7 is that because of the need to ensure total and complete implementation of each of the articles, we adopted a binary scoring process of either 1 or 0 because the protocol does not envisage partial implementation of the articles. Number 8 is that on issues relating to representation of women in any section of the material protocol is put at a cutoff point of 30%, meaning that any article in which member states report less than 30% representation, because there are many structures that you find within the protocol that require women being represented, either in decision-making structures or not. If you don't have up to 30% representation, your score is automatically put at 0. Now, how did we calculate the indices? Of course, like I've stated all the indices that we have, but let me go a bit into details on how this was done. First, we calculated the article performance index. This index is meant to analyze performance of each article under a theme. This is derived from the member state responses in terms of implementing a specific article under a theme. It is calculated using this equation where A is article performance index, Z is the country score per article. For example, an article can have 5 indicators, and a member can score 3 depending on what they have done with that article. Y is total number of indicators per article. For example, I just mentioned 5 now. So in the case of that particular article, if there are 5 indicators, 5 questions that were used there, that total Y will be, for example, 5. And N is the number of reporting countries. The next one is what we call the thematic performance index. It is derived from all responses of member states to all the articles under each theme put together. There is country's thematic theme, which we call CT, which is the overall score of each reporting member state on all of the 9 thematic focus, while the overall thematic index, which we call OT, is the overall cumulative performance of all the reporting states put together on each of the article. Now, let me even before I explain this equation, let me say to you that what we are trying to do is that, like as I explained with the articles, we need to know, for example, in a theme, which articles are member states focusing on, which one are they not focusing on? And you'll be able to know this from the scores that they get. So immediately, when you look at the scores, you will see the gap. Okay, maybe in team number 1, maybe they are focusing more on 2 articles. Why are they not focusing on this other 2? Because they're supposed to be 4. What exactly is the problem? What are the issues? Well, and then from there, a lot of advocacy issues, and so that we can push the government in a particular direction if they are focusing on that particular theme. So here, CT means country thematic performance index, OT means overall continent performance index, T is the total country score per team, K is total number of indicators per team, and the N is number of reporting countries. N is N everywhere. Then the last set of indices is what we call the Maputo Protocol Grant Index calculation. The country grant index is determined from the performance of each member state in all the thematic focus. The overall grant index is the cumulative continental performance in all thematic focus derived from performance of all the reporting member states in all the thematic focus pulled together. Now, what are we trying to do here is that if I take, let us assume that all the countries that have ratified, 42 countries, wrote their report and were able to generate a report, although in this instance we did for 6, we will be able to say to AU and the Commission that as far as this particular country is concerned, this is their overall performance in all the articles and all the themes as envisaged by the Commission. We can also say that when we pull the whole continent together so far on this theme, this is the performance of the continent. When you put all the things together so far and you want to say, not to make just one statement to say about the performance of the continent in implementation of Maputo Protocol, you will also get the overall Maputo Protocol. That's the index that we use in trying to respond to them. Now, the scorecard and index were tested. When we finished designing, were tested from 6 selected member states, which we will talk to, from where a sample report of implementation was generated. Now, something that is unique about this scorecard and index is that everything inside of it is entirely based on the data provided by member state. We do not use any external data from any intergovernmental organization, from World Bank, from UNESCO, or any. It's all data provided by the member state based on their report. So the whole index itself is based on actual reports submitted by member state, thus giving room for legitimacy, transparency, and high data integrity. If, for example, we are on an advocacy mission and we're talking to a particular country, for example, and we say, sir, you can see that from our report, you didn't do well. If you ask us, how did you know? We'll say, sir, we knew because we got this thing from your report. So in that way, it will be easy to engage and to know that this is what we've done. Now, there is a chapter 2 of this project, which I will try and explain. I haven't explained detailed the methodology. We devoted it to the appraisal of performance of member state, as shown in the Beijing Review report, an appraisal report that was produced by the UN Women, UNECA, and AU. Now, the major analysis carried out using this report plus other things other materials that we also got is that first, we were able to locate and link Maputo Protocol to Beijing plus 25 review report using what we call the ALF plan, mutually reinforcing framework, which we are going to show to you in the next slide. Number 2 is to isolate and showcase the good practices of member states as identified by Beijing plus 25 and other documents that Plan and ALF were able to generate to isolate good practices, which was put in that report. The third thing is that we isolated the gaps, of course, as generated by BIP plus 25 report in a synoptic manner, linking it to the rationale for the Maputo Protocol in the US, as well as making it to answer and respond to the gaps, both as an accountability, monitoring, implementation, and acceleration tool for gender equality and women's empowerment in Africa. Now, this is the table that we use in analyzing the whole of that chapter. And I would like to say to you that on the blue side are the thematic focus of Maputo Protocol, all the 8 thematic focus, all the things that member states were supposed to work on. On the other side are the critical areas that we find in the Beijing platform for action. And you can see that virtually all of them are inside. And what is this saying to us? We can see that the table shows that implementing Maputo Protocol also means covering the critical areas of Beijing plus 25. It's reinforcing one another. Let me go on to chapter 3 of that report. We just have 2 slides. In the chapter 3 of that report, we have detailed all the assessment questions that we use, and it contains 226 questions and indicators. The whole of this chapter has been converted also into an Maputo Protoco scorecard workbook. We are going to produce a workbook out of it to aid member states in responding to the content of the articles as they write their periodic reports to the African Commission. It is these indicators that we use to assess the report of 6 selected member states, and the results actually were presented in the next set of slides. Now, let me pause and explain. Now, it is one thing to design a theoretical framework and say, okay, I've done something. But it's another thing to really find out whether what you have designed can actually work. And this is what we're about to share with you, which you find also in chapter 4 of the document that we earlier sent to you. What we have done is, following the development of indicators, we tested the viability of the scorecard through the assessment of 6 member states reports. Now, the most recent report of the 6 member states submitted to the African Commission of Human Rights were used in this pilot phase. Now, the selected countries were Mauritania from North Africa, 2000 to 2016 report, Republic of Rwanda from East Africa, 2019 to 2016, Togolese Republic from West Africa, 2011 to 2017, Democratic Republic from Central Africa, 2005 to 2015, Cameroon from Central Africa also, 2015 to 2019, then Republic of Malawi, Central Africa, 2015 to 2019. It is very important at this junction to mention to us that the 226 indicators that were developed without any prior knowledge of the content of any member state report. We did not know what they have in their report. We never prepare anybody for this. These were done at different times. We didn't look at any report when we were designing the indicators. So the result of the pilot phase assessment, which includes identify gaps in reporting and result analysis, which I'm going to present now, is entirely based on what we saw in the report itself. And what we are saying with this report also is that a global and comprehensive report of this nature can be prepared for all member states that have submitted their report. It is important that we also say that while we were doing the scoring, while we were scoring these 6 member states, we observe a number of things which we'd like to also present before we go to the actual report and the performance of each of these member states. First, we notice that there are elements of non-adherence to the 8 thematic focus. Number 2, we notice incomplete coverage of articles under each thematic focus as expected by the African Commission. Number 3, we notice non-adherence to page limit. Some have excessive number of pages, while others have fewer number of pages. Number 4, some member states in their report recorded activities that were not in line with the objectives of the article. We notice that some member states have capacity to respond to most of the 226 indicators used for the construction of the index. We also notice that some member states lack capacity to effectively articulate the implementation progress. We suspect there are challenges of underreporting, which might have arisen from lack of proper interministerial coordination among government agencies. This is very important because we have also worked with some of these countries in the past, and when we saw the content of their report, we knew that one way or the other, there are 1 or 2 issues that were not properly coordinated. There are cases of, number 6, there are cases of repetition, especially where there are no effective responses to demand of the article. Number 7, we believe that effective deployment of this index will enable the African Commission on Women and People's Rights and the Women, Gender and Development Directorate to quickly point out or identify various gaps in implementation of the protocol. And that takes me to decide in which we are going to present the results of assessment carried out by this project on the member states that are actually listed. And I'm going to go through them theme by theme. Like we had said, the first theme, like we shared on in the methodology, is what we call equality and non-discrimination theme, which we call in this report Equality Index. In this theme, there are 4 articles, Articles 2, 8, 9, and 12. Except for Article 8, the overall performance was above 40%. The highest being Article 2, 47%, followed by Article 9, 46%. The lowest in that category is Article 8, which yielded 33% in performance. For example, the 46% performance Article 19, or Article 9, rather, means that all the 6 member states evaluated in this project had only achieved 46% of the demand of protocol under Article 9. And collectively, they still have 54% gaps to cover. And then let me go on now. Country by country analysis showed that Cameroon did well virtually in all the 4 articles, the lowest being Article 9 on political participation, where they achieved 50%. In all others, they score over 90% with 100% score in Article 2 and 12. Similar trend were observed for DRC. Article 9 also be their weakest spot. Cameroon scored 100% Article 2 and 12 because there are laws, policies, and active implementation programs that are put in place that address the articles, such as we have the penal code that was established by law number 2016/7 of 12th of July 2016, and the rights against discrimination is also taken into consideration in the national strategic and institutional framework. I just need to explain that to you so that when you look, Rwanda has its highest performance in the area of political participation, where they had scored 100% score based on the assessment questions used to assess this index. Their performance was very low in other articles under this thematic focus. And for the purpose of advocacy, DRC and Cameroon, for example, should focus more on Article 8, which is about political representation. This is the graph that depicts the performance under the equality index. Team 2, protection of women from violence, which covers articles 3, 4, and 5. The performance of selected countries on this article, on this team rather, as shown in Table 2, is much lower compared than Team 1. In terms of our overall performance, Article 3 posted the highest result, which is about 53%, which was essentially due to constitutional provisions. Article 4 got 25%, while Article 5 got 43%. The best performing country was Cameroon, followed by DRC. The performances of Togo, Malawi, and Mauritania were abysmal. The non-performance of Togo, Mauritania, and Malawi was a major factor for the overall poor performance of this team. There are lots of work to be done in those 3 countries. Sometimes the non-performance of other countries affect the overall continental achievement. This is what this kind of things also generate. These are the graphs that shows the performance of each member state. Article 3, which is on marriage. Article 3 is on marriage. That is, team 3 is on marriage, which we call marriage index. Article 6 and 7. Article 6 on the marriage gave an overall performance of 78. While out of Article 7 on separation, divorce, and annulment has 67 performance. 60% performance. Team 6 was the highest performing in this team. In this review, the family code of DRC appears to have covered a lot of issues relating to the rights of women in marriage. Malawi and Cameroon also did very well under this team. As you can see the graph, but we notice that despite the high performance of this team, the issues of marriage, that is marriage less than 18 years, was not properly dealt with in some countries. DRC addressed every article and sub-article of this team and have met the provision of the protocol under this team. For instance, the minimum age required for marriage is defined by law in DRC as 18 years, and any sexual act or marriage contracted before this age is punishable. It's a punishable act provided for by the law. There's also the situation in Malawi, where the MDFRA, the act sets minimum age of marriage at 18. In Cameroon, the minimum age for marriage is 15 for girls and 18 years for boys. Then this needs to actually be aligned. Health indicators. That is Team 4. Article 4, you can see there is only one article that is here. Well, DRC and Malawi did very well under this article. Article 5, this contains a lot of articles and has a lot of questions. All the 6 countries under review, except for DRC and Cameroon, had abysmal performances. The article with less than 30% performance were articles 18 and 19. Other articles were below 40, except for article 15, right to food security. This has very serious implications for poverty alleviation among women, with the attendance impact on national and human capital development. A lot of advocacy and programs are required in ensuring that women have access to food and to resources to produce food. Another major area of concern is right to positive cultural context, Article 17, where the scores were very low from country to country. We need a lot of work to be done on that area. You can see the graph. Let me move on to Article Team 6, 7. They all have each one article. The performance was than 35%, with that of DRC having the highest, and followed by Cameroon, Rwanda, and Togo at 21%. DRC showed a trend of good performance on articles relating to peace. Article 7 on protection of women in armed conflict also showed a similar trend as found in thematic 6. However, it is a surprise that Rwanda did not give any report in this area. This is one of the reasons why we said that we suspect cases of under reporting, and there is a need for countries to take a critical look at their report. Article 8, of course, is also the second highest and most populated articles. Overall performance 34, and it was essentially due to non-performance of some of the selected countries like Malawi, Mauritania, as well as Togo. Implementation. This was the one that we actually added. It was not part of the team, and fortunately, the high-performing countries of DRC and Cameroon did not report on remedies like Malawi. Only Togo, Rwanda, and Mauritania reported remedies, which made Mauritania to have scored the highest performing country in this team, despite their limited performances in all the previous indices and indicators that we are taking a look at. The thematic performance index. This is the overall performance table, which actually brings together all the performance of all the 6 member states in the thematic area. Firstly, the aggregate implementation performance for all the 6 member state review was 43%, which is the Grand Maputo index, meaning that all of them together still have 57% gaps to be covered in terms of implementation in all the 6 countries. Malawi had a very good performance in the areas of health and reproductive rights. I want to summarize everything now, and also marital rights of women. Apart from that, all their performances in other thematic focuses were very low. There's a suspicion that Malawi is underreporting and would like the Commission and WGG to investigate and to try to see if there are ways to enhance their capacity to ensure cover all what they are doing. The also Cameroon reports were followed the guidelines and the analysis of the article in each of the thematic focus. And this is the main reason why it was possible to score them, although we also went through all the other reports. Member states should be encouraged to report their articles relating to the implementation of Maputo Protocol in a more effective and coherent manner. The next set of slides also just shows the performance index of everybody. You can see for each of the teams, you notice that Marita was first, followed by health and reproductive, and then we have implementation, and then equality index. This is the performance of each of the countries overall. DRC had 0.7, which is 70%, Cameroon 65, and then Togo 35, Rwanda 34, Malawi 33, and then Mauritania 19. The same thing we have repeated on this table. In terms of recommendation, as we are trying to round up, ladies and gentlemen, we have some key recommendations that came out of this work. First is that we would like to enjoy the African Union and the UN agencies that are working in this space to collaborate with the African Energy Forum and Plan International to use information collected from each member state's report and submitted to the Commission to prepare evidence-based periodic assessment report, like we've just done, identify gaps and share best practices. Number two, this index we are recommending that should be adopted as a monitoring and reporting and implementation tool to assess member states. Number three is that we feel seriously there's a need to build the capacity of member states, enable them to be able to apply these indicators and report effectively. We are also saying that the index should be integrated to the AU Gender Observatory and online reporting system. Number five, that we should be deployed to assess the implementation of human rights during this COVID pandemic, to also support member states to integrate gender perspective and women's concern in COVID responses and recovery plan. Number six is that member states should be encouraged to provide more gender disaggregated data in their reporting for each of their. There are some member states that did this. For some, they use gender neutral constitutional provisions in place of specific laws and policies that are required for the implementation of each of these articles. We saw this in various areas, even including education. In order to increase the visibility and show the importance of Maputo Protocol to the overall realization of the rights of women, we are recommending that the AU should adopt a decision declaring June 11 as the Maputo Implementation Day, coinciding with the day it was adopted in 2003. Lastly, the information contained and the rights enshrined in the Maputo Protocol must be made accessible to women who are primary beneficiaries of the protocol. In this regard, we are therefore suggesting, one, translation of the key components of the protocol to local languages of the state. Two is to integrate the major content and the rights of the protocol into the curriculum of primary school, secondary school, and then general studies actually in the university. Finally, we want to say that this study was done to develop a continental scorecard and an index framework, which will be used in analyzing and assessing member state performance in this. We do hope that you all lend your voice by giving necessary inputs that will enrich this document and ensure Maputo and ensure the member states adopt this and use this day as we try to push the gender equality agenda in Africa. Obrigado, merci, shukra, asante. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for taking us through the Maputo Protocol scorecard and also the index framework in a detail that the time allows us. So according to our agenda, it's going to be a break, but I think in the interest of time, I would say if we continue with taking questions and some reflections from the participants, that would be great. Okay, we can raise our hands, but also we can type our questions and our reflection into the Q&A chat box that we have. So when I give you the opportunity to speak, then we have to be extremely brief, but also introduce who we are, particularly the organizations that we represent. Mubarak, I'm allowing you to come in.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Dr. Jeff, for the presentation. I'm from IGAD, and I'll have a question and an observation. The question is why link the... I'm interested in finding out why we made the linkage between a binding legal agreement in the Maputo Protocol to a non-binding declaration in Beijing Platform for Action. The natural cousin at global level of Maputo Protocol is CEDAW. So it'd be interesting to find out why that relationship and where this leaves other normative frameworks on the continent, like what we see in the Agenda 2063, the EU gender policy, and so on and so forth. The second observation is how we arrive at comparable data among member states, particularly considering the qualitative nature of assessment questions. And by this, I mean that the way country A answers questions might not reflect the same interpretation and understanding by country B, because the questions are really open. If I just give one example, if we say under 2A, are the citizens, especially women and girls, aware that there is a gender equality law or constitutional provision? Again, that's a very subjective question. It may assume that there's only one law, and yet the laws might actually be many. So how do you distinguish between countries that have very many laws vis-a-vis those that have only one law, and also looking at the scoring system being binary, it is either 0 or 1, or anything minimal points to a 1, and how reliable would such data be in terms of giving us a true picture of the status of gender equality? Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, can I answer? Can I respond?
Let's see if we have more hands so that we can use the time effectively, because I don't see hands so far. I think Dr. Ajay can... Oh, I can see another hand. I'll do. Perhaps let's take a few more questions and then you respond.
Okay.
Okay, can I go on?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Audu Ahmed Kuma. I work with the ECOWAS Gender Development Center, which is based in Dakar, Senegal. I would really like to commend the AU, the Africa Leadership Forum, and Plan International for this great initiative. I think that it has been long in coming, because we have not really had this kind of mechanism that would enable us to really monitor and track the implementation of the Maputo Protocol. This is one of the weaknesses which has been highlighted, and I think this is a very important tool that can really enable us to achieve that objective of tracking and ensuring that the protocol is well implemented in the member states. Just a few questions. One is with respect to the African Gender and Development Index. I know we have this particular tool that exists already in the continent, and also the African Women's Progress Scoreboard. I don't know what has motivated the development of the MPSI, which I think we could have tried to build on what really exists. I don't know if this was done, but I think that we have to avoid duplication and try to maximize the resources that we already have in the continent. I know the MPSI is specific to Maputo Protocol, but I think that the African Gender Development Index could have served as a base for developing this index. I don't know if probably we can throw more light on the process and why we are not building on the AGDI and the African Women's Progress Scoreboard in developing this particular tool. Secondly, in reading the document, it's not very clear to me what roles the RECs have to play in the implementation of this tool. If there's any role at all, probably might want to throw some light on that for us to know what role the RECs have to play. And also, I'm told there are 226 indicators in the tool. I haven't seen the indicators. I don't know whether they are incorporated in the tool. I don't know whether it's the assessment questions which which are also called as indicators, or if there are indicators apart. I haven't seen them. Probably you might want to talk through that. So there are also, enablers. Apart from the reports that we have from member states, there are enablers which would make it possible for the member states to be able to implement the Maputo Protocol, to ratify and to domesticate and implement, and there are also challenges that the member states might go through. I don't know whether I don't see these challenges and enablers captured in the tool, because it's very important as you try to assess member states in the implementation of the protocol to also assess the challenges that they have encountered, which might, play against their ability to implement the protocol in the way that it's designed. So these are just the basic things. And then the last one is with respect to theme 6 and 7. I think, which is right to peace and protection of women in armed conflict. I think this can be brought together as one theme. It will make it more efficient, because the two are linked. So to make reporting more easy and to make assessment more apt. So I don't know why they have been separated, but I think that it will be useful to have it as one thing, to make reporting much easier. Well, these are quickly the issues that I wanted to raise, and probably might want to talk to them that in a way that enable us to really concretize this tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abudu, for that very important question. I can see Esther, and then Kennedy, and then Caroline. So you can go in that order. We'll start with Esther, and then Kennedy, and then Caroline will continue.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, and really to just start by congratulating the African Leadership Forum and Plan International, the AUWGDD, and all those actors who've been involved in the development of the MPSI. I think it's something that whose time is right, and it's something that we should have had, going on to mention that the protocol is now going on to its 17th year. And so we've really fallen back in terms of monitoring accountability by states. So I have a few comments, and I'm sure my colleague Kennedy is going to speak after me. Will have additional things to say. But just first and foremost is to note that previously there's been indication that the MPSI is supposed to respond and to be taken as an emergency measure to protect women, specifically within the time that we are in the COVID pandemic. And looking through the document, it's a little bit difficult to connect specific indicators that relate to that emergency response. And the question that I would pose to us all is it better than considering the longer term utility that is intended of the MPSI, that is to monitor accountability by states? And given that, we already know that states are very late in reporting, barely 10% of them have reported. So we really have to think about the emergency response components and just to ask, is it better then to perhaps separate the emergency response in light of COVID-19 and the longer term goal of perhaps an annual monitoring scheme or whatever it may be, specifically for this time when COVID is really high up on the radar for many countries. The second thing that I wanted to pose as a question, it wasn't perhaps immediately clear to me, but there is mention that, for instance, that the themes that have been identified within the MPSI are reflective of the themes that the African Commission has identified in the guidelines to member states on reporting for the on the Maputo Protocol. But I just wanted to see the extent to which the MPSI actually mirrors the reporting guidelines themselves beyond the themes being just picked up and utilized in the MPSI. Thank you. And sorry, I did not introduce myself. I work with Equality Now, which is the Secretariat of the Solidarity for African Women's Rights Coalition. That is a group of over 50 organizations across 27 countries in Africa, specifically working on advancing the Maputo Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Kennedy, can you continue?
For me, I would say that we kind of had a couple of comments about like the platform itself that came in, and one of the things that we wanted to kind of like speak about was first and foremost that it looked as if we were kind of like, we have two comments in terms of the kind of like binary, yes or no scoring method that is unsuited for many of the indicators. So kind of like we were kind of thinking, like maybe asking about, to what extent is 1, 2, 3, or like, kind of like providing like a more flexible band in some of the kind of evaluation questions. So, but then it's also understandable that, like there's also partial fulfillment of the criteria being assessed. The thing is, like if we were kind of like, like to comment on this, it would be like providing also kind of like a wider range of like options and approaches in terms of like some of the questions that were asked. And then also, I think just kind of like echoing what my colleague Esther has mentioned is also to kind of like have a discussion about, the tool itself in terms of like to what extent is it a general tool, and also to what extent is it kind of like suited to like the current COVID-19 crisis that we're in. So I think that, like in terms of having a discussion on this, it would probably,
All right. Thank you very much, Kennedy. Can we now move on to Caroline? And then Dr. Ajay, you take over from there. And then after the feedback, we will see if we have more questions and also comments. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'd like to congratulate Plan International, the ALF as well, and the Africa Union WGDD for this big effort, because it is a big effort to come up with an MPSI-like tool. So for sure, for that, we want to really congratulate you for that big effort. I had just a few comments building on to what Mubarak had mentioned at the beginning. I just wanted to know how far this tool was also informed by the ICPD 25 and the Addis Ababa Declaration on Population and Development, because a lot of the SRSH reporting and the Maputo Protocol is actually included in that. So just to find out how far did that inform this tool, since we see the tool is based on the Beijing plus 25, but also the ICPD plus 25 and the Addis Ababa Declaration would be very relevant to inform the tool. I think secondly also, it was just to find out your thoughts on the synergies between the MPSI and synergies with other political consensus documents, such as reporting on Agenda 2063, reporting on the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda, because there are elements of reporting that are included therein as well. So to see how is there synergy in reporting on this, on the MPSI, as well as the other relevant political consensus documents. And lastly, I wanted to just find out the level of involvement of the REC in the development of the tool, because there are where a REC like SADC has a reporting tool on the Maputo Protocol as well that they are using for the SADC region. So just to find out how that also informed the MPSI. This is Caroline Ngonze from the UNSCA Liaison Office in Addis Ababa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Dr. Ajayi?
Thank you very much for all of these feedbacks that, of course, will also give us opportunity to reflect and also respond to some of the issues that have been raised. From IGAD, you spoke about comparison between two countries and the way they responded to questions. You see, when we raise a question, people will answer different ways, but there are certain core elements that will pull out of that response to show to us that they have responded to those questions. And once they respond, 6 countries can respond in 6 different ways, but they're all speaking to the implementation of that particular article and the other. So it's that's the way we're able to gather discourse, and then overall we're able to do that comparison. So the responses to questions definitely will be different, but we haven't set the questions and know what the kind of critical issues we are looking for. Once we get into the report, you can have 3 laws, for example, status, addressing a particular issue. Another one can have one that covers all the things that you have in your 3 laws. So once this law speaks to those issues, we really have to score them accordingly. ECOWAS Center spoke about the African Development Gender Index and African Women Progress Scorecard and what motivated MPSI. You will see that while we're articulating this, we had said that, and when you look through, each of those indices perform different agenda and goals around development. This specifically speaks onto gender equality and women's empowerment, which is the focus of the protocol in itself. So what motivated us is to accelerate the implementation of Maputo Protocol. It's not possible for us to hide it under any other thing, because there is no one particular index that covers all the issues that are discussed in under the Maputo Protocol in itself. Of course, the regs are supposed to work with AU in assessing their own member state also using these tools. The questions that we ask are also the indicators, because when you respond to a particular question and you have done what the article says you should do, of course you have a score. So you can interchange each of these. Of course, the issue of enablers and changes that member states encounter, you notice that this report isolated some of the challenges that we saw in the report, and we also provide solution in a number of cases to say these are the things that they need to do. But you have to look at it in a very global manner to see why are countries having challenges in responding to this on that. And you notice also that some of them are actually working, but they could not report on the progress they are making under the Maputo Protocol. The right to peace, protection of human rights, and please, we cannot match because this is what the guidelines says. We saw this in the guideline, they were separated, unless the African Commission issue a new guideline that matches the two, and then we're able to now rework and match those things. If they do so, it's not going to be difficult because the frame is already there. Esther, thank you very much. Equality now. MFSI is a long-term tool beyond COVID-19, but that is the objective. But we know that within the COVID-19, certain things that have happened within COVID-19 will not have happened if we had been implementing the articles and the spirit and the intent and the content of Maputo Protocol. It's in that regard that we are saying this. I've answered the question of the team. It is how it was reflected in the guidelines of this. Now, also, Kennedy, you tried to raise an issue which you also provide an answer. We do not expect partial fulfillment or partial implementation of the article. It's going to create a lot of complexities if you try to say, okay, this person has implemented partially, give him 0.5% or give this one 5%. It's going to be and you know that the one way that which you can actually push member states to do some of these things is to say you have not done what this says you ought to do, and then these are the things you need to do to be able to achieve this. How far is this informed also by 1325? Of course, there is right to peace, which is Article 10, which deals with some of the issues that are captured within 1325. Of course, when the other political instruments and reports and governance issues that we have, because gender issue resonate, and you find gender issue in almost all of these documents. It's gender is cross-cutting. So wherever you are discussing this, if Maputo Protocol scorecard and index is available, you can always say, see, in this area when we are discussing this aspect of governance, your member state is not be doing this because we got this from the member. You can always integrate this scorecard and index to any other issue that relates to Maputo Protocol and gender equality and women's empowerment at any level. Thank you. Those are my responses. If I skip any, please kindly remind me.
Thank you very much.
I was told that I didn't respond to IGAD. Relation between a binding rule and non-binding rule, like what we did was to say that yes, there is a Maputo regime platform for action, but we are saying that when we implement Maputo Protocol, the content of it, we are more or less, though it's non-binding, but we are more or less doing what we are more covering critical areas and the pillars of Beijing platform for action. It's not that we're just saying that by doing this, we are also doing this other one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay. If anyone from the AU also feels like responding to additional points, then the floor is open. In the meantime, let's also accept more reflections and questions from the participants. If you have a question, kindly please raise your hands so that we allow you to speak.
Sarah, shall I?
All right. Yes, Victoria, please.
Yeah, alrighty. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ajayi, for all the responses. I think I also just want to emphasize two things. One is that an underlying objective of this Maputo scorecard and index is that we really want to emphasize implementation of, like, we want to put a spotlight on implementation of the Maputo Protocol and accountability directly related to Maputo Protocol. We know that, the one of the main challenges that we've had with Maputo Protocol is that while it is one of the most ratified women's rights instrument in the continent, of course, this is our Bill of Rights. This is a Bill of Rights for women. But that reporting at the African Commission level has really been a bit low. Yeah, we've also complained quite a lot. We've had many concerns across the board about. We've had concerns across the board about implementation of Maputo Protocol. We know that it's a comprehensive document. It's awesome. It's beautiful and so on. But there's that deficit of implementation. And this document here is really helping us to put a spotlight specifically on Maputo Protocol. So yes, there will be other scorecards which speak generally around issues of gender equality and women's empowerment. But we also thought it is important that we enhance reporting on Maputo Protocol, we enhance accountability on Maputo Protocol, and enhance reporting, accountability, and implementation on Maputo Protocol. That's one. But I also want to emphasize that what Dr. Ajayi mentioned, and I also spoke about earlier on in relation to our online reporting mechanism. We are very cognizant of the multiple reporting obligations on member states that also make reporting a bit challenging. And what we want to do with this framework is that once it is on our online reporting platform, it will also make it a little easier for member states to report. And we hope that our next step out of this will be where we now integrate the Maputo Protocol 1325 SDG, into one framework. But we have to start somewhere, and this is the point at which we have started with the Maputo Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Victoria.
Can I come
in? All right. Okay.
Hello?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, you can come in, please.
Okay. Thank you. I am Dr. Asfour, President International Federation of Business and Professional Women and Business and Professional Women in Egypt. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for this fantastic, comprehensive illustration from the Maputo Protocol. And as Maputo Protocol, and thanks for AU and all the partners for organizing this first ever for the SCORE index. As coming from the private sector and women entrepreneurship, I would like to say that as Maputo Protocol is very comprehensive and covering a lot of aspects, especially also with economic rights for women and non-discrimination, economic violence against women. So one of the things that I was thinking of this SCORE index, how really to popularize it among other organizations, which is not purely within the whole issue of women's rights, referring to its outreach to other organizations for business and professional women across the whole continent, the private sector, and make it really one of the requisites for the private sector and the companies to see how we can make the domestication for them, like the WEPs, Women Empowerment Principles, which is a UN initiative, and the UN Global Compact is going for all the private sector to sign on it in order to promote women in leadership, for non-discrimination for women, for making the workplace safe for women. So we really need to get the Maputo Protocol going beyond the box of our already known organizations to popularize it for within the whole other outreach for the private sector, because the part for the economic justice and the economic rights within this, the Maputo, is not really well popularized. So I thank you, Dr. Ajay, and maybe we have this into consideration with reference, as I talked before, like what President Ramaphosa said in his acceptance speech about this year will be the African Decade for Financial Inclusion for Women, how we can put it within the economic rights, with reference to public procurement, how we put it within the economic rights for this Maputo Protocol. So link all the indicators of Maputo Protocol with other advocacy pillars that we are doing as business and professional women on the continent and international. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asfour, particularly for bringing the non-conventional, partners, particularly the private sector, into the conversation. I can see a few hands. Let me start with Marie, and then right after Marie finishes, Pravina will continue. So introduce yourself and particularly where you come from. Thank you.
Hello, am I being heard now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Good afternoon to all the participants. Good afternoon to Dr. Ajayi and Victoria Maloka for the presentations this morning. I am Mary Sen from the African Commission. I'm a senior legal officer at the African Commission in Banjul. And it was very interesting that I participate in this validation workshop. I have seen that our special rapporteur has already given a statement, but unfortunately she couldn't stay on for this validation meeting. I have listened keenly to Dr. Ajayi's presentation, and I want to say congratulations. This is a very good work that you have done, and particularly as the African Commission, we have a mandate to ensure that states report on the Maputo Protocol. And having a tool of such a nature, I think it's very important. And I wish to congratulate Dr. Ajay and your team, as well as the Gender Directorate, for coming up with this initiative. Now to the specifics. I have listened, and I know that at the moment, the Commission has developed guidelines to guide states in reporting on the Maputo Protocol. So I just want to know how this scorecard will now be used. How are we going to make sure that the ACHPR is able to make use of this scorecard in its bid to effectively execute its reporting mandate under Article 26? That is one. Secondly, I also want to know whether the Gender Directorate would engage the African Commission after this validation meeting on this important tool, so that we're able to take it forward and ensure that it is being effectively used. The other thing also, the African Commission conducts what we call promotion missions. And during these promotion missions also, we use the opportunity to also sensitize the member states on the tools and soft laws that are on the ground that can be used in trying to improve their human rights landscape. And one way that the advocacy that the previous speaker is talking about is also through these promotion missions, where the Commission can also inform member states during their promotion missions about the existence of the scorecards and to get states to buy into this so that at the end of the day, it is effectively used. Because it is one thing to develop the tool, I think we have already said it, and another thing to make use of it effectively. So I would want some responses regarding how the ACHPR will be part of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary, for those very important contributions and also questions. Pravina, you can continue, and then Esther, you can follow her.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And let me add my congratulations to Dr. Ajayi for lots of investment and work in this area, in the scorecard and developing the indices. I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we
can. You hear me? Hi, do you hear me? You can hear you. Okay. I think that the important point in all of this is that we must recognize that the scorecard has been developed in Africa. And for the first time, or amongst few times, we will be assessing ourselves against a homegrown measure. So I think that is something that we must applaud. Hello? Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
We can hear you. Ravina, go ahead.
So I'm saying that so we must applaud it for being an African initiative, and where we will evaluate ourselves by something that has been developed on our continent. The second issue I want to address ourselves to, and that is because we're not a homogeneous continent, and we should not then only use that that point to criticize the tool, but we should look at how we take the tool and make it adaptable to our very context, whether they're political, whether they're cultural, and whether they are the nuances that represent, without going away from what the protocol seeks to achieve, and not going away from what the indices have to measure. So I think some adaptation is what we as institutions should, and civil society organizations, as well as the business sector, should be involved in taking this to the next step. So mine is to add real congratulations to this initiative and say, we now, as Africans, can say we also are able to develop tools that measure our work and lead in this area. So congratulations to all.
Thank you very much, Pravina, for those very important comments and congratulatory remarks as well. May I now invite Esther? Esther, I can't see your hand now. Okay, Kennedy, you can continue. All right. Looks like we're having a bit of a technical. So, okay.
Hi. Yes. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask the question once again. And the follow-up that I wanted to kind of raise was to do with also also talking about Article 8 of the Maputo Protocol in terms of the evaluation. We note that even though there's kind of like a large group of marginalized communities that is mentioned in discussion to do with the Maputo, like in Article 8, only women with disabilities was mentioned. And we kind of like wanted to like recommend also like the addition of like, you know, kind of like both kind of like also elderly women and, you know, women with disabilities, women in distress, especially on account of like, you know, economic distress, and also kind of like women who are head of households and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like also what we had wanted to kind of like talk about, like the rights of specially protected women groups. And also in terms of kind of like the conversation that we're having about the COVID-19 crisis, it's important to also kind of like recognize that vulnerability and disability are things that are kind of like coming up in very special ways, especially because now the COVID-19 crisis also has not only like a health vulnerability dynamic, but kind of like also economic aspect as well. The last thing that I would also kind of like wanted to ask is whether there is an opportunity for civil society actors to kind of like send in recommendations in writing as well, just in a bit to also like contribute to the continued like basically to amend or like also improve the monitoring tool going forward. Let me just say on behalf of the SOA Coalition as well that this has been a very good opportunity for us to kind of like articulate some of our the issues of our constituents, and we are also very thankful for the organizers of this validation, you know, workshop today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hello.
All right, Esther. Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and good to hear from all of you. You know, COVID has given us the new normal. And okay, so my contribution basically is coming from a question that was asked by Mr. Ahmed from ECOWAS. I just wanted to say that I, first of all, will congratulate Mr. Jaye and Plan International, FAWE, and all the GA partners who has been working tirelessly with civil society and also moving it further to ECOWAS AU level. Honestly, this index at the AU level isn't basically the first one. I have to commend them, like I said. This is more or less a scaled up, you know, because I think that they use the bottom-up approach, which we were part of the civil societies where we had access to be trained on how to do it in country, of which Genstead has done a scorecard on Ghana's Maputo protocol. We have a full scorecard on the Maputo protocol. And for me, I think the approach of having it as a bottom-up thing really is very helpful even to the AU, where civil society, and my brother just asked where civil society can come in. Yes, it's important. Where civil society also can do independent scorecard of government implementation of the protocol vis-a-vis what government is going to say that they are also going to, that they have done. Where you can say, okay, yes, government, this you said, but it's not true. So I just want to say that, yes, there are a lot of civil society who have been trained out of the GA, and we've all been able to do the scorecard in country. But I will urge our new participants today that if we can take the conversation from this platform into our countries and begin to do it in country, so it will compel government to do something. For example, in Ghana, we haven't even reported on the Maputo and the Gambia Banjul declaration. We haven't even done anything on those things. But because we did the scorecard, government now is realizing the need for them to report, so that when civil society do scorecard, they can also have an alternative to say, yes, what you are saying is true or it's not true. So as we speak, Ghana is doing their reports, you know. So I think this is a very welcoming news that we are doing it across the African countries, where we'll be able to hold our government accountable and see the gap, the recommendations. Like Dr. Ajayi said, even the one civil society we did, we identify gaps, we identify recommendations and what we need to do, of which governments were involved in the launch and everything. They were involved in the process. So they realized the need for such things, which then helps them to also know what is still left. Right now, one of the things we did, we realized that the social protection is not there. The COVID situation has shown that social protection mechanisms are not really strong. It's just a thing to share food or things for people when you think they're in a distressed state. But what is the actual solution? What actual structure are you putting in place that will address the social inequality gap in the system? Not necessarily doing havoc things like sharing food, which has a time limit and all that. So currently, even the government is trying as much as possible to develop a social protection mechanism which will address future pandemics or post-COVID, how we're going to manage all these things. And I believe it's all because civil society were involved in doing the scorecard and bringing to the attention that government needs to do this, and they realize that, yes, they haven't done it, of which they see the need to do it. So I just want to encourage my colleagues from civil society on the platform that let's take the conversation further and be agents in our countries and be doing it there, so that when we tell African Union that this is what we civil society we are doing, at least we can feed them with data. They can begin to talk to member states with a research-based information, that they have concrete information, concrete evidences from the countries that they are speaking to the member states concerning it. So I just wanted to contribute this little and all that. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you very much, Esther, and particularly for bringing the CSO voice, and because you've also, as you said, have done the CSO scorecard on the same. Let me now call upon Robert. I see his hands to speak, and then we'll continue with the response from Dr. Ajayi and also Victoria. Robert.
Hello. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to be here, Sarah. I joined a bit late, so please excuse me if some of these items may have already been spoken to by other interventions. The first is a question. Is this an African Union-led index, a scorecard and index, or is it a civil society-led? I see and I note on the document that it is a EU plan and the leadership network, just to confirm, because number two, there are plans to have in place a scorecard and peer review mechanism on harmful practices that would be led by the child marriage and FGM initiatives of the African Union. So noting and knowing who is leading on this would be important in knowing how and when we are contributing to this index that is being presented. And third and not least is the fact that also UNHCA as well as the African Union had been discussing for quite a while developing a scorecard on gender-related issues, in particular the implementation of the Maputo Protocol. So just to also understand whether or not that has fed into this process and whether or not we are inviting their inputs into this process. But I've also been looking in detail as to the extent with which we are looking at how FGM is featured in this index. And I'm wondering whether or not there'll be room to submit written input, if possible, particularly if this is a civil society-led index. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Robert. You haven't introduced yourself. Robert is from the Salima, the AU Salima initiative. So I think. All right. I think we can proceed to the reflections from both Dr. Ajayi and also Victoria. All right, Dr. Ajayi, you may continue.
Thank you very much. What I could not cover I'm sure Victoria will be able to respond to it. Dr. Amani Asfor, thank you for your input. I would like to also share the same concerns that you have about letting private sector be aware of what we are doing within the scorecard and index. If you look at Article 19, it's more or less address a lot of issues about the role of private sector in ensuring that in promotion of gender equality, in ensuring that women have rights to equal remuneration for jobs of equal value, in recruitment, promotion, dismissal, harassment in workplace, insurance protection. All of those issues are covered under Article 13 of the protocol, and we have sufficient questions and indicators that members, private sectors can embrace to try and help us in implementing this, and also help member states in ensuring that the content of that article are well implemented within our countries. Maricene, thank you very much for your comment. Victoria will respond more to this, but what we have done in this index is to actually tailor everything completely with the guidelines that the Commission provided. We didn't do anything outside what the Commission, except Article Theme 9, which is actually Articles 25 and 26 implementation. So everything is within. We are mindful of this because any attempt to bring anything that is not within the protocol into this design and calculation will render it illegal. So we are very mindful of those one. Of course, WGGD will urge you in implementation of this tool, but Victoria will speak more about it. And I want you to also look at our recommendations, and you will see that we have already apportioned specific roles for the Commission in taking this forward. Pravina, thank you, because thank you for saying all of these things about having homegrown initiative and context. Yes, we should apply this to the context of our country, but the spirit and the demand of the article can be lost. You can use different ways to implement it. And just speak and develop initiatives and laws and policies, programs that actually promote and enhance the rights of women, emphasized in each of the articles of this. So it's very, very okay. Kennedy, we can take recommendations you and let me take Kennedy and Tawa Esther together. You see, we should not make mistake by thinking that civil society cannot work with member states. In fact, we should work with member states. And one major advocacy area civil society across the continent, beginning with equality now, is when this index shows that member states are not covered. When this index shows that, okay, they are doing certain things, and maybe you don't believe they are doing it, it provides advocacy opportunity for all civil society and all the stakeholders to engage member states based on the outcome of the assessment that's been carried out. But we need to see member state report first before we can take them up on what they are doing and what they are not actually doing. And this is the spirit of the Maputo Protocol index first. Robert, thank you very much for your, maybe Victoria will also respond to some of the issues that you raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'm okay.
Shall I go ahead, Sarah?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Continue, Victoria.
Okay. Let me start with my two colleagues, the DSA and the African Commission. Rob, the fact that the WGDD is here, it means that it is an AUC document and does require us to coordinate a lot more, as the Commission, and to make sure that whatever that the one hand is doing, the other also knows. So we'd be happy to engage with you after the meeting. And of course, with the African Commission, it has been the plan right from the beginning, because this cannot be implemented without the African Commission. And hence, right from the beginning, even at the launch of the document or the launch of the project itself, we had invited Commissioner Lucy. But we also see that it is important to involve the Commission itself, and it would be great to actually link up after this meeting so that